Corrugated steel rebars are one of the most important materials in contemporary construction. Although they look like common metal bars at first glance, they are actually the result of a highly controlled industrial process that combines metallurgy, recycling, hot rolling, heat treatment, and mechanical surface design. Their function is not just to provide strength. They must also work in perfect coordination with concrete, resist tension, absorb dynamic stresses, and remain stable for decades within beams, columns, slabs, and foundations. Their extraordinary resistance does not depend on a single factor, but on an entire chain of technical decisions. The selection of scrap or base steel, the chemical composition, the working temperature, the progressive deformation in rolling mills, the formation of corrugations, and the final quality control. This is how the steel that supports entire buildings is produced. The history of a corrugated rebar begins long before it enters a construction site. It begins in storage yards, recycling centers, car junkyards, industrial demolitions, and scrap yards where tons of used steel are gathered. There arrive crushed car bodies, removed structural profiles, pipes, appliances, machinery parts, rails, and metallic remains of all kinds. What once formed part of a vehicle, an industrial warehouse, or a production line ends up converted into raw material for a new metallurgical cycle. This recycling capacity is one of the great advantages of steel. It can be melted down over and over again without losing its essential properties, something that makes this industry one of the most efficient in material recovery. But the production of resistant rebars does not start by simply melting any metal mixed at random. The scrap must be classified. Not all have the same thickness, the same composition, or the same behavior during melting. Therefore, it is separated into categories such as light, medium, and heavy scrap. Light includes thin sheets and small pieces. Medium gathers tubes, profiles, and structural parts. Heavy incorporates solid blocks, axles, thick plates, or rails. This separation is important because each group contains different levels of carbon, residues, paints, greases, and other elements that affect the final quality of the steel. Once classified, the scrap is loaded into enormous high-capacity metal baskets. From there, it is moved to the heart of the steel mill, the electric arc furnace. This equipment is a gigantic steel vat lined internally with refractory materials capable of withstanding extreme temperatures. When the basket is discharged into the furnace, the roof closes and the large graphite electrodes descend. Then begins one of the most violent and spectacular stages of the process. The electric current jumps from the electrodes to the metallic load and generates an arc of extremely high temperature. In a few moments, the surface of the scrap begins to soften, deform, and finally melt. Inside the furnace, the metal passes from a solid state to an incandescent liquid mass. At that moment, melting is not enough. It also must be refined. The steel that will serve to reinforce concrete needs a very specific composition. It must have the right combination of strength, ductility, and weldability. If it contains too many impurities or poorly adjusted proportions of certain elements, it can become brittle, unpredictable, or difficult to work with on site. For this reason, oxygen is injected during melting to oxidize undesirable impurities, and fluxes, such as lime, are added to help drag sulfur, phosphorus, and other contaminants into the slag. Slag plays a key role. It floats on top of the liquid steel and acts as a protective and purifying layer.
Bring it up slow.
Many of the residues that would weaken the final material remain trapped there. At the same time, operators and control systems add ferroalloys in calculated quantities to precisely adjust the chemical composition. Manganese, silicon, and other elements allow for the modification of hardness, mechanical strength, and the behavior of the steel during rolling and subsequent cooling. All this metallurgical work has a very clear objective: to produce a steel that is not only strong but also compatible with reinforced concrete. Concrete resists compression stresses very well, but it is weak against tension. Steel, on the other hand, supports tension very well. When both materials work together, each compensates for the weakness of the other. However, this association only works if the steel possesses stable mechanical properties and a thermal expansion similar to that of concrete. If both expanded or contracted very differently with changes in temperature, internal tensions, cracks, and loss of adhesion would appear. Therefore, rebars are not manufactured with just any available steel, but with a material specifically designed to be integrated within the concrete. Once refining is complete, the furnace tilts to separate the slag first and then pour the liquid steel into a casting ladle lined internally with refractory. This ladle transports the metal to the next phase before it loses too much temperature. The steel is still at more than 1600 degrees, a temperature sufficient to remain fluid, but one that begins to descend from the moment it leaves the furnace. Every minute counts. If the metal cools too soon, the entire process becomes complicated and quality can be affected. At this stage, the future resistance of the rebars already begins to be defined, not only because of the chemical composition achieved, but because uniform, clean and well deoxidized liquid steel will be the basis of a homogeneous internal structure. After the furnace, the steel still does not have the form of a usable bar. It remains an incandescent liquid mass that must solidify in a controlled manner. This transformation occurs in the continuous casting machine, one of the most important pieces of the entire plant. The ladle pours the steel into an intermediate tundish that regulates the flow and distributes it with stability towards several molds. From there, the metal enters water-cooled copper molds. Contact with those cold walls produces an immediate solidification of the outer layer. A solid shell forms while the interior still remains liquid. As it descends through the machine, this semi-solid bar is guided by rollers and sprayed with water to complete its solidification. At the end of the journey, the steel has already turned into a solid piece of square or rectangular section known as a billet. This billet is the intermediate product from which the rebars will later be manufactured. It does not yet have corrugations or a final diameter or a commercial length, but it already possesses something decisive, a stable shape and an internal structure sufficiently consolidated to withstand the next great deformation. The billets pass to the cooling area and then enter the reheating furnace. This stage is also essential. The steel must return to a high temperature to be able to deform plastically without cracking. When it leaves the reheating furnace, the billet enters the rolling mill. An extraordinary transformation occurs there. A thick, short and solid piece passes through a sequence of rollers that compress it over and over again. Each stand reduces the section and at the same time lengthens the piece. The steel is not cut or sliced to thin it. It is squeezed and stretched by means of controlled pressure. The rolling mill works in stages. The first rollers make thick reductions. The next ones adjust the shape. The final stands bring the material to the almost definitive diameter. Everything happens in seconds. The temperature remains high, the steel is red hot, and moves faster and faster as its section decreases. This increasing speed is not a minor detail. As the bar lengthens, it must circulate faster so as not to pile up between stations. The final result is a long, continuous rebar, much thinner than the original billet. The future resistance of the rebar depends largely on this hot deformation. During rolling, the internal structure of the steel reorganizes. The metallic grains change, refine, and orient themselves according to the process conditions. If the temperature is correct, if the reduction between rollers is well calculated, and if the speed is controlled with precision, the steel acquires a very favorable combination of strength and toughness. It is not only about giving it an external shape, it is about modifying its microstructure. However, one of the elements that make this product so special is still missing: the corrugated pattern. In the final stands, or in rollers specifically designed for it, the surface of the bar receives the characteristic relief of ribs and lugs. These ridges are not ornamental. They are the key to the mechanical anchorage with the concrete. A smooth bar could be enveloped by the concrete, but it would tend to slip when the structure went into tension. In contrast, the ribs generate grip, friction, and interlocking. The concrete adheres around that relief, and the transfer of stresses between both materials becomes much more efficient. That is one of the reasons why a corrugated rebar supports buildings so effectively. It does not work alone. It works joined to the concrete. When a beam receives a load, one part enters compression and another enters tension. The concrete absorbs compression better. The rebar absorbs tension. But for this cooperation to work, the rebar must remain fixed within the hardened mass. If it slipped, the structure would lose resistant capacity. Therefore, the surface geometry matters as much as the internal composition of the metal. After corrugating, many plants apply accelerated cooling using water boxes or similar systems. This step not only lowers the temperature, it also acts as an inline heat treatment. The surface cools rapidly and the core remains hotter for a brief interval. Then, the internal heat migrates outward and metallurgical transformations occur that increase the mechanical resistance of the bar without making it excessively brittle. This balance is essential. A rebar that is too soft would deform too much under load. One that is too hard could break abruptly. Construction needs high strength, but also certain ductility to absorb movements, overloads, and seismic events. Upon leaving the rolling process, the rebar already looks like the final product. It travels along long cooling tables where it loses temperature until it can be handled safely. Then it is cut into commercial lengths, normally of several meters, and passes to the inspection area. From an incandescent billet to a usable corrugated bar, the entire process occurs with extraordinary precision. Every millimeter of diameter, every rib, every second of cooling, and every degree of temperature influences the quality of the result. The resistant rebar is not born by chance, it is born from an industrial sequence tuned to the limit. The resistance of a corrugated rebar does not depend on a single characteristic. It is the sum of several properties acting at the same time. The first is the mechanical strength of the steel itself. This material withstands great tensile stresses before permanently deforming or breaking. This capacity is fundamental in structural elements such as beams, columns, slabs, and foundations, where loads constantly change due to the building's own weight, furniture, wind, occupancy, and even seismic movements. The second key is ductility. A good rebar must not only resist, it must also deform in a controlled manner before failing. This capacity to give warning, to absorb energy, and to redistribute tensions is indispensable in modern structures. An extremely hard but brittle material could break suddenly. In contrast, quality corrugated steel combines a high yield point with a useful deformation margin. This combination offers structural safety. The third reason for its effectiveness is the bond with concrete. Here, the corrugations again occupy the center of the problem. The surface ribs significantly increase the anchoring capacity. When the concrete hardens around the bar, the relief prevents slippage and allows the stress to be transferred much more efficiently. In other words, the rebar does not only resist by itself, but because it is firmly geared to the material surrounding it. This union turns reinforced concrete into a composite system, not a simple superposition of materials. The fourth key is the thermal compatibility between steel and concrete. Both materials have relatively similar coefficients of expansion. This means that when the temperature rises or falls, they tend to expand and contract at similar rates. This coincidence avoids excessive internal stresses and contributes to the union between the two remaining stable for years. In structures exposed to daily thermal cycles, extreme seasons, or fires, this detail is of enormous importance. The fifth reason has to do with quality control. A structural rebar cannot leave the factory without rigorous verifications. The diameter, mass per meter, height and spacing of the corrugations, chemical composition and mechanical resistance are checked through tensile, bending and other tests. Internal or surface defects that could compromise its behavior in service are also detected. This final stage is what separates any steel bar from a reliable product for construction. On a construction site, it is not enough for the steel to look strong. It has to prove it with specific, repeatable and certified values. Even so, resistance does not end at the plant. It also depends on correct use on site. Rebars must be placed with the appropriate diameter, with the spacing provided in the design, with sufficient concrete cover, and with well-executed ties or splices. An excellent bar can perform poorly if it is badly positioned or exposed to premature corrosion. Steel has a known weakness: oxidation. If water, oxygen or chlorides reach the surface of the metal, corrosion begins to reduce the useful section of the rebar, and by losing section, it loses resistant capacity. That is why concrete cover is so important. It not only keeps the bar in place, it also protects it from the environment. Under normal conditions, alkaline concrete forms a relatively favorable environment for preserving the steel. But if cracks, carbonation, persistent humidity, or aggressive salts appear, the protection decreases. In severe marine or industrial environments, additional solutions are used such as galvanized coatings, stainless steels, or special low-permeability concretes. The most impressive thing is that, despite all this technical complexity, the corrugated rebar remains a mass-use industrial product. It is manufactured in enormous volumes, transported to thousands of construction sites, and ends up hidden inside structures that can last for decades. It is not seen on the finished facade, it receives no attention when the building is inaugurated, and it rarely appears on the surface of a city. However, almost everything built in concrete depends on it. Apartment towers, hospitals, tunnels, dams, overpasses, parking lots, schools, bridges, and retaining walls share the same principle. Concrete to support compression, corrugated steel to absorb tension, and both things working as a single unit. That is what makes them so resistant for supporting buildings. Their composition is designed to resist. Their manufacturing process refines that resistance. Their rolling and heat treatment multiply it. Their corrugations connect it with the concrete. Their ductility makes it safe, and their quality control guarantees that each bar responds as expected when buried in the structure. They are not simple metal bars. They are structural components of the highest responsibility, manufactured to work for decades, supporting immense loads without drawing attention.
But it's there, holding every